I was on this bus ride once, and this was a long bus ride. It was in Guatemala, and the bus was the exact cliche like you would think, right? It was super crowded. There were various, maybe one or two farm animals of some kind, be they chickens, on that bus. There might be stacks of grain on that bus, and just a ton of luggage on top or shoved wherever on the Guatemalan bus. And I was taking this bus in the middle of nowhere, but I remember I was going back to Belize, right? We were going back towards the Belizean border. And when I say we, I mean me. I do remember that time I happened to be alone. The only person from the project doing this. And I forget why. I forget what brought me there. But I just remember being on this really lonely road on this, chicken bus in Guatemala going towards the Belize border. And it's like afternoon. And as I was sitting there, crowded, I remember for a while there was just a guy's butt like right here next to my head, but I just didn't care because I actually had a seat. But the guy with the butt had gotten off, and it had spread out a little bit. Bus stops, middle of nowhere, and a really old woman gets on with a boy who's about maybe 15 years old. And the boy has obviously really hurt his hand. There's a cut in the middle of his hand that was just really deep. I'm sure it was very painful, and it looked bad. And they were going to the next big town to get some medical attention. And I saw them, and I remember being struck by how this 15-year-old boy was so stoic. He was so just stiff upper lip. He was not showing any emotion. It's something that had to just be like really, really painful. I'm sure he cut it on some sort of farm equipment or something. Really sort of like almost an industrial, sort of cut. And so he sits down with the grandma, and then the bus starts to go. And I'm looking at it, and I just have my day pack with me. I got barely anything in my backpack, but I realize that I have one of those wet wipes. I have a wet wipe, like the thing that you would use to wash your hands before you're going to eat your peanut butter and jelly sandwich at your picnic, right? One of those. I have this wet wipe, and it's on a little single one, its own little single pack. And I open my backpack and I get it out, and I'm thinking, I'm gonna give it to the boy just to put on his hand for some sort of basic antibacterial something. So I take it out and I give it to the old woman. They're sitting across the aisle. Or imagine these buses they're like American school buses. They're that sort of bench seat thing. So they're sitting diagonal right in front of me, and I kind of tap the old woman, and I'm like, here you go, and I kind of sign to her what it is. I do know some Spanish, so we kind of talk in Spanish a little, and and I tell her, hey, put it on his hand. And she's like, oh, and she gets it and she unwraps it, and they put it on his hand, and I can tell he puts it on, and it kind of stings, of course, right? He puts it on, and he's sitting there, and then the old woman turns around to me, and she's so overly thankful for what I've given her, and she's almost tearing up that this is just sort of such a nice thing that I've done. And I've given her a wet wipe. And, and the boy kind of nods his thanks. And it was one of those moments where there's not a reaction to that. You can't go, you're welcome, because it's so nothing. And the pain he was going through was so much more, and he needed so much more than I could possibly give. But my wet wipe made me the hero for the day, right? And then the boy and the grandma got off not too soon afterward at the town, and they were going to go get, first aid medical attention at the hospital. And I drove on for the rest of the afternoon, and I finally got back to Belize in the evening, but that has always stuck with me.